All right, let's get into this. So basically, these are the new rules that may potentially come out for Social Security benefits, including disability benefits and also retirement benefits. And what do I mean by all that? I mean that the government is facing a unique situation where it wants more and more people to go and work. And so, as a result of that, we're starting to see policies pop out. And one of the biggest ones is from, of course, Trump, where he said he wants to get rid of the taxation of essentially retirement benefits if you're working and earning over the 25K and the 34K limit. So let's get into this video real quick because it's going to specifically answer ideas that are being floated by politicians, or really the think tanks that are behind the politicians. And of course, I have some of those friends in that arena, and some of my ideas are actually being considered with the politicians. So I can say some of these are actually mine that are gaining some traction, which is absolutely awesome. With that said, let's get into it right now. Please remember to like and subscribe. If you like the video, it helps the video succeed. If you really want to help me out, go to Google, type in disability resolution, and basically from there, throw some review stars up on the board. Let's go into it real quick. So I've been hearing about suggestions because with the difficult economy, destitute dollar, and the reality that people can't survive what they literally earn on their own, let alone paying for kids. I mean, that's just out of the question at this point. The SSA is in a tough spot considering the fertility rates, right? There's not enough kids, which means there's not enough workers, which means there's not enough taxes paid, which means the trust funds are in even worse and worse spots as the years come through. So the idea is, how do they get the disabled people and retired people working and not getting penalized with their benefits? Because remember, if we penalize them, if we make it tougher for them to work, they're not going to work. Okay. The idea is that working disabled and retired pay more taxes than non-working beneficiaries, which is to some degree with the disabled, with the SSA system especially, it is counterintuitive because the SSA system, there's four main ways to be found disabled. Compassion allowance listings, you're really bad, potentially terminal, potentially bedridden. Listings, you're really severe, right? Amputee one is like they got to take your hands, your feet, or your entire leg and half the hip. Grid outs, that means you're older and more likely to be found disabled. And vocational allowances, which means you can't do a job because all your impairments combined limit your ability to do functional work tasks. So, what's happening is, and why this is really interesting for you guys, is that we are living in a unique situation where if you are disabled and retired, the likelihood that you get to have your benefits and earn income and not be penalized is at the highest likelihood with them changing rules and regulations than it has ever been in the history of the Social Security Administration system. Now, with that said, they want the retired and disabled to work because they pay taxes and general taxes. They pay FICA taxes that pay money into the trust funds. And in general, right, in general, it increases the capacity of the federal government, state government, and county governments to do borrowing and create loans. It also allows them to print more money. All right, let's start with the disabled, right? You guys know what the SGA rule. SGA is substantial gainful activity. SGA is a limit on a person's ability to work and earn money if they are disabled. That's for both SSI people and SSDI people. SSI people are supplemental security income people. They come in multiple flavors, right? You've got the SSI immigrants, entrants, refugees, asylum seekers, which are kind of in the news right now or will be even more as the election season heats up. Then you've got old age SSI people, 65 plusers, and disabled SSI people. Okay. Now, you've also got SSDI people, which are disability insurance or regular disability or paid into the system disabled people. Okay. SGA 2024 is $1,550. If you earn over that amount, you have violated element 1 of the 5-step sequential process, which is a class 5 no bueno, because then you shouldn't be getting benefits unless you use a program. What's a program? Well, the next thing we're going to talk about is called the 9-month trial work period. You all know what it is. For 9 months, you get to earn as much as you can, and you get to keep your benefits. That program then leads into what's called the 3-month extended eligibility program, where for 36 months, if you earn over, it starts the counter, right? So during a 36-month period, anywhere during that period, if you go ahead and earn over SGA during that 36-month period, 12, 24, 36, 3-year period after the 9-month trial work period, then they will give you 3 months in a row where you can earn, and they're consecutive. So you got to use them. You got to earn as much as you can for that 3-month period, where you can earn as much as you want and still keep the money. Okay. Then after that, a lot of people will look into what's called the Ticket to Work program. Now, the Ticket to Work program was the brainchild of a lot of brains, and it was a good idea, but it's highly restrictive. They're constantly watching you. You're constantly reporting your earnings. You're constantly reporting what's going on with the job, what's, this and that. So people feel hyper restricted, and they're also living in fear because at any moment, if they violate something, they could get kicked off the Ticket to Work program. And then boom, they're getting hit with all these penalizing options, which restrict their benefits, create overpayments. So, it's a good program. It's just a highly restrictive program. Now, SSI people face additional challenges when it comes to earning money as disabled people, because the thing is this: they have an additional poverty restriction on them that SSDI people don't have. The SSI people, essentially, who have earned income exclusion issues, basically have this problem where if they earn over that $65 per month, and then there's also a $20 option as well where they can add that on top. But if you earn over that 65, potentially 85, then every $2 you earn over it, they take away $1. So it literally, as an SSI person, doesn't pay to work, right? If you think they're going to get hourly wage and minimum wage, and then the SSI benefits are going to get vacuumed away from them, it is a massive, massive thing that is promoting for SSI people to not work, which is now, ironically, against the public policy of where the government wants to go. Back in the day, that's exactly what they wanted to happen, for SSI people to remain in a poverty state. Now they don't want that. They want the SSI people working, whether they're immigrants, whether they're old age 65 plusers, or disabled. Dinah Fernandez, thank you for the $2 donation. That's absolutely awesome. Glad to see you there. Very, very cool. I'm glad to see you there with the happy face. Awesome. Very cool. So here's kind of the basic thing. And Charleston Zimmerman, that's a good question for the live later. Ask me that during the live later, because I will be going live after the show to answer questions. So here's the thing: expanding those particular items, when it comes to these allowable programs, is one way we can go ahead and increase the likelihood that people will be able to work. But first thing I want to cover, because these are all the ideas about how people can earn more when on disability benefits. Because remember, you have 2 classifications of individuals. Well, technically 3. You have those who are basically disabled and there's no way they can work at all. You have those who are disabled and they can potentially work a part-time job. And then you have those who are disabled who might be able to work a full-time job, right? Those are your 3 classifications of potential workers that are available in this situation. So let's talk about the first thing that they could do to create laws, statutes to change essentially how people would be able to earn more and keep more. So they want to expand the deductible potential option, right? So there are deductions that you can make as somebody who's working as a disabled person that would allow you to go ahead and not hit the SGA limit. So let's say that you earn, I don't know, $1,800, but $400 of that is deductible. So instead of the actual countable amount being $1,800, it's only $1,400, which means you're under SGA of $1,550. In other words, they only allow certain things to be deductible, but allowing an additional potentially $1,200 to be deductible for any reason would allow the disabled person to work and not violate SGA for a certain number of months. Now, I pulled the statute for you guys to tell you exactly what the deductible options are, that way you would know what they are. In order to know what's deductible, you have to know what IRWEs are. So definition of an IRWE under DI 10520.010. Okay, an IRWE, or an IRWE, means an expense for an item or service which is directly related to enabling a person to work and which is necessarily incurred by that person because of a physical or mental impairment. So the intent of this statute, or rather policy as part of their POMS work, is that there's something you need as a disabled person that other people might not. And that thing you need, they're going to deduct it from your potential earnings. And that way you can earn more over SGA, but you got to watch it because those deductions, they're not going to cover a lot. The IRWE must be needed due to an impairment that the DD has established as the medical basis of disability or another impairment that is being treated by a physician or healthcare provider. Expenses for impairment-related items or services may include payment for purchase, installation, maintenance, and or repair, right? And then, of course, some of the people out there will set up payment plans that, by month, by month, by month, allow them to continue to da 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 da. So, there's ways to do it. Now, with that said, here's the note. Unless the repairs for an impairment-related modification, such as a wheelchair lift, there can be no separate amount deducted for maintenance and repair of automobiles or vans used for transportation to and from work, since these costs are included in the mileage rates indicated in Section DI 105.20.010J. For example, the IRWEs, see the Red Book. And we'll do a full video on them so that you guys know all the little ins and outs of those tricks, okay? Now, let's go through some of these things here so you kind of understand. This is really, the definition, but you know what? It's too many items, actually. Let me just focus on the generalities of this. So there are deductibles. I am hearing potential talks about allowing for deductibles that are beyond just what you would traditionally need for essentially your impairments. So, for example, if you would need some sort of person to be hired to drive you, right? And that's a cost that you incur. So, that would be something that potentially would be covered, because if you are blind and you still need a way to get there and you don't have a bus stop situation, they're like, okay, well, in order for you to get to work, you got to do this. Then obviously giving you a deduction for a driver to basically get you from point A to point B and then pick you up from point A to point B or B to A, that would be an allowable IRWE. However, if you were to go ahead and allow an exclusion of an additional $400, $600, $1,200 right off the bat, then that would allow people to, have basically either the option of finding things that would be deductible, or it could just be essentially an exclusion where this amount of money doesn't count, right? You could allow and open it up to things that are not related to their impairments, right? They could be things that are regular driving, regular car this, and then they would treat the individual that's disabled more like their own little mini business. And that little mini business would have more deductions that aren't related directly to their impairment. And then they could take it further and kind of expand those amounts. So let's say that you had to go ahead and pay for something with a vehicle that wouldn't normally be covered. If it's a business oriented use to get you to work it and they allowed it, they could just allow that thing to be covered. Or they could allow that thing to be covered and give you a certain amount above that. Or they could just give you a certain amount in total that could be used as a potential deduction. So that's another thing as well. Now, the next thing is the other option is to increase the SGA amount. I think that's one of the simplest things. It would be within a lot of the regulatory abilities of the SSA. I mean, Congress might have to get involved to some degree, but I think this is kind of a big ticket item that the SSA would want to utilize. So instead of $1,550, it could be $3,000 per month, which, considering the strength of the dollar to ramen ratio, makes a lot of sense. If we allow people to not be cut off at $1,550 and we allow them to be more around $3,000, then that increases the likelihood that that person will be able to afford their monthly expenses, including but not limited to, for example, things that are, for example, like, rentals or housing or mortgages or this or that or whatever. People who are disabled right now realize that a lot of the jobs are changing. So a lot of modern jobs, they have at-home work jobs, data entry at-home work jobs, call center at-home work jobs, stuff like that, which vastly increases the likelihood of a disabled person to work and earn. And the reality is that if we don't have that 1550 restriction, we increase it to 3,000, a percentage of individuals will continue to work that. And that's to the benefit of a lot of people. That increases the amount of taxes paid into the general tax, taxes of the government, and also increases how much money would be paid into basically the trust funds of the SSA. So increasing the SGA amount kind of benefits all parties included. It allows the disabled to go ahead and earn more and keep more. It allows the government to retain more in taxes, And then basically it allows society to do better because there's more people working, having purpose, etc. Because one of the big things that happens to a lot of disabled people is that they literally live on this terrible clock of existing to not have to spend money. Like, one of the weird things for me is that I live on the extreme other end of the disabled, right? The disabled live in the world of, how do I sit here and not cost any money, right? How do I spend time without spending any money? Whereas I live on the other extreme, which is, how do I process all these claims, do as much as I can on a daily basis? And, I've got to spend money to go ahead and produce money kind of gig. So these two ends of the apple. And I would like to see, if there are individuals who would want to work, that they would have basically the option to go ahead and have that to earn more if they wanted it. Now, the other option is to allow people to work and earn 4/4 of coverage before the SGA amount kicks in. This would be amazing for SSDI people, but even more so amazing for the SSI people, because then they can work their way off of SSI and onto SSDI and retirement benefits. And this would allow the government to spend less general taxes on SSI people, because they would have already paid into the trust funds and earned their spot onto the pay to play programs. So that's something that's gaining a lot of traction. That was my idea, and some politicians really like it on both sides, actually. So it's kind of a win-win for everybody on the Democrat and the Republican side. Now, the other option is to allow people to earn 2 extra quarters of coverage without it counting against them, thereby paying in more money towards the trust funds as taxes paid. So basically, a 2024 quarter of coverage is worth around $1,730 per quarter. Okay, $1,730 per quarter. If you allow people while disabled to earn 4/4 of coverage, plus an additional 2 for that year, or for every year they would boost their pay into the trust funds and increase the retirement amount to the benefit of the government in the long investment period, that would benefit everybody involved, right? Unless, of course, that person lived to 100, then the government would get screwed over because they'd have to pay them a lot of retirement benefits, because the longer we live, the less the government gets to keep. And the government is the house. Usually the government wins. So the bottom line here, just so you guys understand that one, is we can allow people to basically earn more than just 4/4 of coverage per year, and giving them that option to try and achieve that more quarters of coverage will make them more likely to want to work and earn more. Because here's the reality: SSI and SSDI people, they get so little money, they are in starvation mode. The SSI people, the average is 600 and something dollars, right? Max is 943. SSDI people, average is like $1,500. You can't make it on that. You can't live on that amount. It's just not reality, right? It's just, think about it. SSI and SSDI benefits are basically like a TV challenge to see who can survive with the least amount. You ever see those like shows where they like put the people on an island and they're like, "Hey, figure your shit out." That's kind of what SSI and SSDI benefits are like. They put you someplace that costs money. You have very little money, and then they tell you, survive this month. That's basically what disability benefits have become at this point. So bottom line is this: the other option is to increase the hourly pay of Ticket to Work program approved jobs, so that people are more likely to work in the 5-year program, by having the government further subsidize those low stress, high accommodation jobs. Now, the reason you could do this is that it would increase the likelihood that basically these, people in the Ticket to Work program, are likely to earn more from these hourly wages. Because remember, the Ticket to Work jobs are like auto jobs that you can sign up for. Their pay is total crap. Total crap. So when people are like all excited, I'm in the Ticket to Work program, and then they see their hourly wage, they see the taxes coming out, they're like, well, what's the point? What is the point? And the reality is, if the government subsidized those with a little bit of money per hour, you'd get a lot more disabled people wanting to join up, because they would see the higher hourly wage and see a higher benefit potential of actually working as a disabled person. Remember, the Ticket to Work program, the whole point is training disabled people to work, so that at some point into the future, they can get off of disability benefits and have a career, right? That's the whole point of those programs, all right? Now, another option is to create a 7-year program with a 2-year increase option. This is similar to what we give immigrants who get SSI benefits for 7 years, plus a 2-year up option. And then some of them go on and work, and some of them go on to disability as naturalized citizens. Bottom line is that you could have the 5-year ticket to work program extended to 7 years, which bolsters the likelihood that people will continue to work to keep their benefits, right, and keep their income at the same time. And then they have that 2-year add-on option potentially to achieve even more milestones. So think about increasing the 5-year ticket to work program to 7 years and then giving them a 2-year add-on option. And that 2-year add-on option could be like, hey, if they, were able to win a company award, or they were able to get a promotion, or basically things that would increase the likelihood that they will want to continue to work and achieve, which, to be fair, gets them off of disability benefits, gets them into a career, gets them on track, etc. Because people are more likely to continue working in a particular field if they've reached the role of a manager instead of staying in the same spot that they were the entire time. And so that's the tricky part. Some disabled are never going to be able to achieve the manager spot. Some are. I still think we need to have something that bolsters the likelihood of individuals to achieve that higher level and continue pushing them forward. Because remember, the whole idea here is a carrot. Some people will say, well, it's not fair because I couldn't da. Yeah, I get it. But at the same time, the whole idea is a carrot. If you're sitting there trying to get that promotion and trying to get that boost, right, it's more likely that you will be on the track to achieve that thing. If you're sitting there like, well, I'm on the ticket to work program, it is what it is, yada, 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 I ain't getting better anywhere down the line, then you're just going to keep doing what you're doing. There's no emphasis to push the individual to achieve more. Another option is to create a federal-backed disability lottery. I know we've talked about this a couple of times, where only those who are working while disabled will be entered into the drawing and can win the money and keep their benefits during a certain amount of time. It's a low amount of people holding a ticket to win a potentially life-changing amount. It's an idea. It's a carrot program. It has potential. Now let's focus on the retired, okay? Getting rid of the 25K, 34K rule. So you guys know what that is. Wow, so big donation. Secret squirrel, very cool. Very, very cool. $20 donation, that's awesome. Let me put a little happy face on that. Very, very cool. Thank you, Secret Squirrel. That's amazing. Secret Squirrel said, I love how well informed you are and your dedication. I appreciate it. I really do appreciate it. So that's and the big thing too is that I'm so in this field, like, and people always say, like, why do you do stuff about politics? Because this stuff about politics is literally the future of the benefits you're going to receive. So that's why I'm up to date on it, because I'm watching the ups and downs of where the politicians are at to figure out where the future of this whole system is going to be going. But anyways, for the retired, if we get rid of the 25K, 34K rule, it's a moral thing, because, taxing retirement benefits a second time is unconstitutional, even though they passed in 1983. And then, of course, the other thing is, to be fair, that taxing old people on money they already paid taxes on is just kind of immoral. It's very immoral. It's unethical. So the point is, getting rid of that rule would increase the likelihood that retired people wouldn't feel like they couldn't go back to work and earn more. Now, some people will emotionally say, well, it just feels terrible that, retired people should have to go back and work at all. It just doesn't seem right. Why would they have to do that? Well, the reality is this. Most retired people within a 5-year period from now will be forced to go back to work, and they will be forced, if they're too old, to sell whatever their living accommodations were, to be then transitioned into some sort of elderly housing. And let me explain why that's going to happen. A lot of people think that retirement years are supposed to be your golden years. They're not anymore. They're your rust years. And what it comes down to is that you, living in this economy, can't afford on your retirement benefits and probably the little bit of savings of stocks and bonds, whatever you put aside, you will not be able to afford a future. And the reason you won't be able to afford a future is that the cost of your property taxes, the cost of your food, utilities, the cost of your gas, your car changes, the cost, and here's the big thing. Insurance. Insurances are becoming completely untenable. Elderly people, above all, cannot afford all the different insurances: life insurance policy, car insurance policy, home insurance policy, umbrella insurance policy, special medical insurance policy. Blah, 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 blah. They cannot afford insurance. Medicare, within 15 years, is not going to be affordable for most recipients of retirement benefits. You're going to see in 15 years a lot of elderly people having to just go to the emergency room over and over and over and over. And then basically, the hospital is just going to build a bill against a bill against them until basically something has to happen where they have to either sell something or they basically just have to move into some other housing unit, and that hospital has to waive whatever their fees were. So the reality is that the retired are less and less likely to afford the monthly and annual yearly upkeep costs of their so-called golden years, which are really just the rust years at this point. So the point is, they have to work. And so a lot of articles are coming out, things from ARMP, nonprofits, etc., that are basically taking a situation and they're studying essentially how the elderly, which is a good thing because for the disabled, like, you study the elderly to know where the disabled are going. I've always thought that if you want to know what's going to happen to the disabled, study the elderly. And so the reality is this: the elderly don't really have the choices anymore to just live on what they have, because with massive inflation, what they have shrinks immensely. And then with increased cost per month, they just can't keep up, which is why we now live in an era where the millennials, the kids of the boomers, have to actually help their parents afford things on a monthly basis. Because remember when the boomers were all like, those stupid, terrible, blah, blah, blah. Remember them when they were doing those quotes about how terrible the millennials were, and they don't want to do this, they don't want to work, and so on and so. Remember when they pushed all that agenda? Well, now the millennials are having to pay for their parents to upkeep their actual financial costs, because the property insurance, the property taxes, the house keep, etc. Now, another thing that nobody really talks about much on a lot of these channels, the thing that's biting the retired in the butt when it comes to work rules, things like that, is that a lot of retired people are forced to go ahead and be put into a financially dangerous situation because the things that houses are made of, right, are not quality products anymore. So, for example, the refrigerator only lasts 4 to 5 years, maybe 6, 7 years tops, right? Same thing with the other appliances, same thing with the toilets, same thing with the little ring at the bottom of the toilet, the wax ring, and now they make them out of different things, as well. But the bottom line is none of these fixtures are lasting like they used to. A lot of the glues, a lot of the silicones, a lot of the different, Daxes and Permas and things like that. A lot of those don't last like they used to. So what's happening is roofs are having to be replaced a lot more often. Refrigerator, dryer, washing machine have to be replaced a lot more often. And so what's happening is these elderly people who are used to having a refrigerator that lasts 40 years now are stuck in this constant rotation of having to pay things off using these new programs where you pay later. You pay, so many payments over the next couple of months, or you pay in four, or you have, this much in debt with this particular card, or you have PayPal credit or whatever. So what's happening is that these elderly people are constantly getting stuck in this rotation. And even though they don't spend much per month, they're having to spend a lot more per month to be able to survive. So getting rid of this 25K, 34K rule will increase the chances of them being likely to go ahead and work and not be as restricted, because at 25K, they can tax up to and around 50K of your retirement benefits. 50% of your retirement benefits, whereas at 34K, they can tax up to 85% of your retirement benefits, depending on your filing status. So the ironic thing is that unfortunately our elderly are being forced more and more into not only just like you might have to go work environment, but you are now required to go work as an older person. So this idea of retirement benefits is transitioning from enjoy your retired years, right? Enjoy your future, blah, 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 blah. Now it's not that. Now what it is basically you've now entered the retirement stage. You're going to get a check, which will assist you, and you're going to work lesser paying jobs because you don't have the capacity, stamina, whatever you want to call it, to actually work these higher level paying jobs. Now, some rich people will disagree with me. Some very, very rich people will completely disagree with me and say, in your elderly years, you have the most wisdom, the most experience, the most knowledge, the most capacity to go ahead and do these functions. However, right? That is from the perspective of somebody who is a very rich person, right? Those very, very rich people, those millionaires and super millionaires and billionaires, they can go ahead and have amazing medical treatment. And so, when you see stockbrokers, when you see money management people that are, 87 and still, managing money funds, that's because they have the medical backing them to keep them healthy. And also, their jobs do not require them to do physical labor that would injure their body to the point where they couldn't work anymore. And that's why we have rules with Social Security benefits like disability benefits, where if you worked a blue collar job for that 35 years, right, and you have lower education, then we can give you an automatic approval in certain situations. Now, here's the deal. With retired people, things become very specific to age groupings. Age groupings, very specific. Okay. So, one of the things I want to focus on real quick is explaining to you essentially how elderly people are going to be forced to work into the future because they're part of this whole Social Security recipient thing. And essentially, what that's going to mean for a lot of individuals going forward. I have a little mini article here, but I just want to go through some basics. Okay. So, first off, you have retirement options. Early retirement is 62, full retirement is 67 now, and then max retirement is 70 years old. Okay. The bottom line is if you're working and earning money, okay, when you retire early, they penalize you more. So basically, the way it works is the earnings test before the full retirement age. So if you're under the full retirement age and receiving Social Security benefits, so basically, if you're under 67 years old, your benefits are reduced if the earnings exceed certain limits. For 2024, the earnings limit is $21,240 for every $2 earned over this limit. $1 is withheld from benefits. And then in the year you reach full retirement age, so right, the year where you're about to reach your 67th, age, a higher limit applies, $56,520 in 2024, and $1 is withheld for every $3 earned over the limit until the month you reach full retirement age, until you reach 67. So the point with this thing is that they can change these additional rules so that they're not withholding any dollars at all from your retirement benefits. Now, this, from their perspective, will decrease the likelihood of people wanting to work even harder because you're letting them keep more of their Social Security retirement benefits. However, the problem is the economy has been poorly managed. And so as a result of that, and I know people are going to say comments and chat and this and that, but let's just be fair. Let's be very fair about this. There are many ways that they could have properly managed diesel, gasoline, farming, etc., oil, petrodollar that would have made this entire, post-COVID situation much more palatable. And then people always raise the argument, well, look at the other countries. I'm not saying other countries aren't led by idiots. I'm not saying that they're not led by idiots. They certainly are. But you can tell some of these countries that are especially led by idiots, they really abused their retired individuals. Okay. All these special, green taxes and this like that. I mean, I was amazed that people allowed these things to get voted through. I never thought people would vote through all these ridiculous taxes on their heads when they couldn't even afford things as they are. And the worst part is the economy went to hell, massive inflation, and now they got a tax that's new on top of not having enough to begin with. So it's bad. It's bad. And what's happening is, just so you guys understand the American model, the American dream situation, is that every single generation that's born has to struggle to survive by earning enough to make it through the rotation. If you guys ever think about that, there was this idea, right? If you go back all the way to like early times of peasants and kings and stuff like that, basically they worked essentially a little bit less than half the year, right? That was their gig. They worked less than half the year. And then as we became evolved and manipulated by the wealthy, it turned into a 5-day work week. It turned into sit there and work, 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 work. It turned into overtime. You're still not making enough. It turned into one husband can't afford for his entire family to succeed. It turned into both have to work. It turned into basically now where families can't afford to have children. So as a result of that repetition and growing problem, we're now at a tipping point. We now have people, right, our working class, Gen Y, millennials, Gen Zs, Gen Alpha. We're now at a tipping point, okay? And the bottom line is that we don't make enough money as a country, and we need the disabled and retired to add to it. And with all these new immigrants that have come into the country, they're going to be on a 7-year SSI option, many of them, right? And as a result of that, what happens is those people 7 years down the line will seek 2-year up option. So realistically, 9 years, the immigrants won't be helping with a lot of the tax options and stuff like that, but they'll be ramping up. In the long run, all these immigrants helps us. Okay. In the short run, it hurts us tax wise, which ironically, in a situation where we can't afford to print money because it will devalue our international currency, and we can't afford to borrow money because who the hell is going to give it to us as a country that can't afford its own interest charges? We're in kind of a unique financial problem. Now, there's another thing that a lot of people don't know about, which is that on rotation, when the federal government borrows, okay, our Social Security money and taxes that we pay in, that they convert to special bonds, right? When they borrow our Social Security money and convert it to special bonds and then spend it, they have every so many years, right? Those bonds become due and the interest on top of them becomes due. And we can't afford the bonds and we can't afford the interest on top of the bonds. So they've got to print money just to keep Social Security going. That's another thing that's going to be very scary that's coming up. So just to clarify, they could get rid of, for retired people, those punishments for working while receiving retirement benefits. Now, a lot of people will argue, and I thought it was very interesting. Trump came out and said, we're going to get rid of the 25K, 34K, limitation for retired people. And remember too, that was actually a Democrat owned idea. Democrats wanted that. Democrats promoted that until Trump said it. Then you have article after article after article after article saying how the Social Security system will fail if they don't tax the elderly. So the ironic thing is that it appears that there's some bullshito going on with these politicians between the left and the right. And I really hope we vote every effing one of them out, because there is no way for the disabled and retired to succeed with a single one of them remaining in office. There's just no way. There's too much hatred and lust for hatred for each side that they will literally destroy the American people in their disabled and retired status just so that they can hurt the other party. That's the reality we face. So the point is, they could go ahead and get rid of the $1 taken away out of $2 limitation. They could get rid of the $1 out of $3 taken away limitation. But the bottom line is, they need to make it more affordable for retired people to go ahead and exist. And that's either by increasing the retirement benefits, which we don't have the money to, decreasing the cost that they have to pay, which we would have to control different industries, right? We'd have to control insurance industries. We'd have to control internet industries. We'd have to control tax industries more and reduce the amount that they pay. Taxes, they already have some of that built in, but they'd have to reduce it even more. And that is an interesting thing. Why do we have a tax, like a home tax? Like, let's say if somebody owns a home, why do we tax the retired? Does that make sense to you? Like, I get why we tax people to own a home when they're under 67 or potentially even, and I get that. If you're like a disabled veteran, you pay like $50 on a $5,000 tax bill, right? So, there is that. But like for retired elderly people, like, why are we even taxing them once they reach that age? Like, to me, if you're truly trying to give them the best golden years of their life, why would we tax? That's the largest tax they have to pay. Why would we do that to them? And so, it's unfortunately, and I need to make something clear. My family members were involved on both the bad side. Well, they're both bad sides, but the being terribly treated and the terribly treating of basically, places like Auschwitz, Dachau, things like that. And if you guys don't know what that is, they're the encampments during World War II. And so what you have to understand, if you're ever wondering why I look like kind of Jewish, but also kind of Christian, kind of Ukraine, Austrian, kind of German, but then also weirdly Scottish. Yeah, my genetics have been basically refugee around, asylum seeker sent around. So when people are like, oh, your people have been here forever, I'm like, dude, we've been here for very few generations. There's the Walters, the first, second, and third. I'm the third, and then one above that, and that's it. That's the cutoff. So point is, and that's on my dad's side. Mom's side is even less. My mom's side is the Jewish side. I mean, that's directly World War II related. That's directly, so the point that I'm getting at with this is that unfortunately, we have to find ways to get the retired to more likely work. And so we're going to have to go ahead and create new reductions in taxation, new reductions in how much insurance costs for them, which is then going to put more and more burden on these smaller generational groups like Gen Y, millennials, Gen Z, etc. Now, I want to cover something because a lot of people aren't talking about this, and I think it is relevant to it. Could the working class work over age 70? And would that then increase their Social Security benefits? They did this article, which I thought was really well written. It's written by Ray Hartley Beck, updated on December 14th, 2022. Here's basically the details. Working after age 70 could increase your Social Security benefits if you're earning a high salary or didn't have a robust earnings history in your younger years. So put another way, if you're earning a lot past 70, then it will help. If you had crap earnings your entire life, but then magically 70, you're earning more, 70 plus years old, you're earning more, then it could help. So let's go through real quick. Social Security benefits are based on your top 35 years of earnings. Remember how I always talk about a 35-year averaging algorithm that they use to calculate, what they're going to pay you, right? How many years did you work, blah, 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 so on and so forth. Well, same gig, 35-year averaging algorithm. That's how they figure out how much they're going to pay you for disability benefits, how much they're going to pay you for retirement benefits, etc. You can see your full earnings record by creating a My Social Security account. Go log on, you'll see it. If you don't have 35 years of earnings, then making even a minuscule salary after age 70 can increase your benefits slightly because it will replace any year with a zero where you didn't earn anything. If you do have 35 years of earnings history, then your benefits will only increase if you are earning more in your 70s than the lowest earning years in your history. So the problem is that's going to be most elderly people that have to work. They're going to have their most highest earning years with the 35 years that came before them, and then their earning years in their 70s are likely to be smaller because they can't do as much, unless we continue to have runaway inflation, which means that people will be earning more because they're forced to earn more to be able to survive. So employers will have to pay them more. And if they pay them more, that shows up as a bigger earnings year as a comparative against, other factors in the earnings algorithm. Now, they could bias their math with the actuaries to be pro 70 plus year old workers, but I doubt they'll do it. That's a little secret way that they'll go ahead and screw over those over 70, where even though you're earning more, the averaging algorithm won't be to your benefit. So if you do have 35 years of earnings history, then your benefits will increase if you're earning more in your 70s than the lowest earning years in your history. In this case, the lowest year will be replaced and your benefits will be adjusted slightly. Social Security was originally created in 1935 to reduce the poverty rate. For seniors, SSA's benefits computation is weighted more heavily towards lower earners, which is their way of saying basically that people who pay in the most get the least amount back. Now, that is going to be a very interesting thing going forward because the people who earn the most are, different classifications. You have people who earn tons of money and will never be poor. You have people who earn a lot of money but spent way too much money while they were basically working and are now in an impoverished state and have to sell a bunch of their stuff. And then you have basically people who are poor, hardly pay anything in, and get the most money back per month, which of course still isn't enough. Now, people with 35 years of high income will not see as big of a jump by working in their 70s, even if they are replacing lower income years. So the bottom line is that, if you go ahead and basically do earn more, you're talking about small increment increases. We're talking $25 here, $50 here per month, stuff like that are kind of what you're looking at. So the point that I'm getting at is that unfortunately working after 70 isn't really going to boost what you're getting thereafter. And the reality is we need to do a little bit of math adjustment and realize that people who work and earn later in their life they are decreasing the likelihood of the extent of their life. Okay, so let me give you an example. You know how people always argue between women and men and who gets paid more, right? And for a little short period of time, women were like, oh, we're ultra victims because we don't make as much as men. And that was true for a period in history for sure. But now it's actually the opposite. And the reason why is men tend to have to work jobs which are more abusive towards their bodies. And they tend to die earlier as a result of that. And they don't get to have the benefit of their benefits from Social Security benefits. Whereas women tend to live a lot longer than men do. And the reason behind that is because the jobs that these guys are doing, could be anything that's, basically you're working up on an electrical pole, you're cutting down trees, you're working on an oil rig, you're repairing houses, you're pressure washing stuff. And I've seen pressure washing accidents. Like, don't think that doesn't happen. I don't mean pressure washing in like a cute way where you got your little $30 electric pressure washer. I mean, like, where, there's a pressure problem and, a metal part flies through your body, unfortunately. So, what happens is you now have this situation where men are earning far less down the line because their bodies are worn out. And women have much longer potential to continue to work and earn, and they live much longer. So they get to have much, much more Social Security benefits that come their way. So what happened is there's this transition, right? There's this transition. I know people are going to say, no, women are, of course, the victims. Of course, they're the victims. But think about it. Okay, let's go through the basics here, right? Average age of men passing away in America. Okay. So we're talking about 73 years old. We switch it over to women, right? They're saying 80.2 years. Okay. So bottom line is, 73, 80. So, you're talking about seven more potential years that a female on average will live than a male. Now, you have to also take into essentially, the reality of different, people who come from different backgrounds, right? So if you grew up on, for example, a benefit like SSI people don't tend to live that long because they just don't have money for quality food. And, they just, I don't know, they just don't live as long. You look at like the blue zone people, and they all have like simple, relaxed jobs or eating Mediterranean diets. They live past 100, all the time here and there. So, it's not all the time, but you know what I mean. So the reality is that we're looking at now is that who actually benefits during part two. And so part one is like 1 to 67, and then 67 to whatever you live to. That's part two. So the thing here is these politicians are going to have this joust where they want people to go and work as disabled people, as retired people. And we've covered a lot of ways that they can change, basically the options for making these people more likely to work by increasing the likelihood that they'll get more money. And then their brain will say, oh, I got all this extra money. I can go ahead and do this now. But there's a problem. You can play the game with disabled people and you can manipulate their brain to think, I'll get a little bit more money. This is really great. Oh my goodness, I'm doing better now. You can do that to disabled people. You can't do that to retired people. The only thing that retired people are going to react to is potential loss of something that they spent their entire life paying for. Let me put it to you this way. Disabled people, right? They didn't necessarily have stuff. They're looking for just a little bit more to survive, a little bit more to have it better, a little bit more, a little bit more, a little bit more, a little bit more. You can sell people with that mentality. So getting the disabled to work, who potentially really shouldn't be working because of their impairments, maybe a heart condition, maybe this, maybe that, you can sell them on getting to work, but you are not going to be as successful in selling retired people to get to work because they don't buy shit, right? They don't buy crap that they don't need. They will buy cheap clothes because who the hell gives a bleep? They will buy, right, they'll find the coupons, they'll do this, you know what I mean? They'll do the Groupon, they'll do that, if they even go to events to begin with. They don't have the emphasis of what capitalism is built on. And that's the real problem. And I see Michael Horsley said older workers will displace younger workers. Yes, absolutely. Older workers will displace younger workers, kinda. This country is going through a transition where we're going back to manufacturing. That is because China has become too expensive, and other places like Africa are about to become too expensive as well. And Africa is becoming the replacement for China when it comes to actual manufacturing. So the result is we are running out of continents to send products to be manufactured. Many parts of India, it's too expensive for people in America to go invest back into. There was a time, and I remember this too, it was about 25 years ago, people who were of Indian descent would say, we got to get back to India and buy our spot now. We got to buy our house now. We got to buy that beautiful property now, because in the future, India was growing too expensive, too fast to go ahead. And at that point, transition to, this more expensive American oriented prices. So as a result, I see we've got some spicy people here in the chat section. As a result, Charlton Zimmerman, oh, man. So as a result of this, you have to keep in mind that you can't play the same mental manipulation games on retired people. They don't care about buying a motorcycle like a Harley. They don't care about that stuff. Once they're over 67, maybe a few more years, but then after that, they're buying a trike, at the most extreme version of them potentially wanting one. You're talking about people who basically will, not go ahead and lease a car. You're talking about people who will buy a car and just get it fixed and get it fixed and get it fixed. The paint's going bad on it. Who cares? Doesn't matter. I think that is the biggest problem that politicians will face with the retired, because the retired are not going to play the same games that our literal system is built on, which is capitalism. Capitalism is all about two companies that are competing, selling people crap that they might or might not need. And that's all about marketing, right? Marketing is the system by which manipulation is promoted to hopefully obtain money from people that don't really need an item. That's the whole idea with marketing. Marketing is really incredibly large and in charge in some industries more than others. So, for example, like the alcohol industry, right? When it comes to, oh, my alcohol is the best, or the horse industry, oh, my horse is the best, or the audio industry, my guitar is the best. Those types of industries breed a lot of capitalistic BS, right? About how their product's great, therefore you should buy my product, blah, 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 so on and so forth. Retired people don't give a bleep about that. They've been drinking the same thing they've been drinking forever, right? They don't want to buy a guitar. They don't care. They're not buying a horse. They're not breeding a horse. They're not doing any of that. They don't care. So the problem is you have a lot of people who are not manipulated through capitalism. They're not going to the mall. They're just not going to the mall. And so we want, as a political group, for the retired to work, because the dollar is devalued, and let's call it like it is. There's nobody coming to save America. America's the final line. Like, you guys ever think about that? Like, America jumps in and saves many of the European nations, saves Israel, saves Ukraine, saves parts of Africa, saves parts of the Middle East, saves parts of Asia, save parts, like Taiwan, etc. But if you guys ever really think about that, America has nobody coming to save it, because nobody can actually afford the cost of America. So that's kind of the funny part about this, is that I foresee, unfortunately, in the future, that America will run into a problem where it can't be fixed, and it will just have to spend and ignore its debt, and then spend into oblivion where it can't afford its debt. And the only way it's going to do that is World War III. Now, here's why I believe the only answer to a lot of this stuff is going to come down to a World War III. In order for America to use the only thing it has to potentially keep its dominance, is to use its war machine. It has the best war machine, kinda. There are certain categories where it no longer does. China has us beaten. In the sea around China and the islands that are there, we barely have the ability now to go ahead and travel with our warships around islands that normally we would have no issue with. China, once a month, has their fighter jets flying around our actual warships, so that are warning them. So the reality is that China, on that side of the Pacific, is trying to take total, complete domination, right? Dominance over all of that stuff. And so what happens then is it cuts off our trade routes, our flight routes, our this routes, that routes, etc., for commerce to occur through that. If that happens, then you're going to basically have the America slash European, you know, G side versus the BRIC side, which equates to, as you of course know, World War III, and those two interests beating each other up. What's ironic about this is that having a World War III would collapse economies. But you have to ask yourself which political leaders would be able to control a World War situation, a World War III situation the best, so that America would come out on top. Because remember, if America, and I know a lot of people are like, America, is laughed at by other countries. Nobody cares. Nobody cares. America, they don't think well of Americans. Nobody cares. Because all that matters is your standard of living in wartime. If your standard of living drops below a certain level, then you become a refugee or an asylum seeker of some other place, which is a hard thing for Americans to understand. I mean, imagine that. Imagine you being a refugee trying to go anywhere other than America, right? Asylum seeker somewhere else because of how bad America is. Just let that sink in a little bit. You guys ever think about like the weird things that America is? Like, okay, so who were the original passport bros, right? The original guys traveling overseas to find their wives. Those were disabled veterans. They were over there during wartime. They went back there. They got their VA compensation check. They're living it good, right? They got their SSDI. They got the VA compensation. They're over there. They're the official earliest version of, passport bros. That would only happen with like an American existence where, basically people are seeking some other culture and it to be paid for by the capitalism of America. Now, interesting stuff. But now in your head, imagine, right? Instead of somebody being in Haiti and wanting to come to America and somebody being in South America and wanting to come to America, imagine you're in America and you are seeking refuge in some other nation because America got hit really hard. And so that is an interesting thought pattern to consider. Oh, I see. Christy said doom and gloom. It's not doom and gloom. It's actually not. Because what it is it teaches your brain to think about things the way other countries think about things. And you may say, oh, that's doom and gloom. That's scary. That's this or that. It's actually not, because it trains your brain to think in a non-American way. And what's interesting about that is the people who say, oh, doom and gloom, how could you? How dare you? Oh, my goodness. America's always going to be this. America's always going to have that. Not so much. Not so much. Consider this. Consider this. It took your lifetime to go from one person affording an entire family a home, cars, all that stuff, vacations every 5 to 6 months. It took one lifetime for you to live in this shit called America. It took one lifetime. That's it. And it's not even a full lifetime. It's not even a full one. You still got 20, 30, 40 years on you. So it took basically a 1/3 to half lifetime for America to go to total shit. So bottom line is this. And I see we got some people fighting over what the term of woke really means. It doesn't have an official definition. But the bottom line is this. I hope you guys understand that politicians want the retired and disabled to work. They're looking at new rule potential options. And the idea here is that they are trying to create a society where the disabled can do more work, which sounds, honestly, it sounds quite beautiful. Become disabled and still work. It sounds like a rah, rah, rah. They also are promoting the idea of getting the retired to work more. Here's kind of the problem I see with all this from my perspective. World War II camps sold the idea that if you work hard, you'll be set free. The same thing exists. I know I'm going to get a lot of shit for this one. Same idea exists in the Christian religion. Right? Heaven. Right? You do good deeds, you work hard, you help people, you measure how people have been helped by you, right? Heaven. Same idea. Work hard, achieve freedom. Same idea, not so much with the Jewish religion. I mean, there's parts of it. Same idea with the Muslim religion. Same idea with many, many different religions, okay? especially the newer ones. You get to Christianity and go to the newer and newer and the newer, you're going to get there, right? Because remember, if you look at the religions, you look at how they existed, you have like the origin story of like no religion to pagan, and then you get to kind of like your Jewish and your Christian, and then your Muslim, and your Scientology, and then what's the new flavor today. So if you look at the spectrum of it, the newer the stuff, the better the reward, right? The more you add to the table, the more something amazing will come to you in the afterlife. So here's the thing. Considering all of that, religions have used that throughout the spectrum of existence for humans in their lifetime to make people behave a certain way. Governments learning from this, you go back to the ancient Egyptians, right? Go back to essentially, getting people to build these giant, massive stone buildings, giant, massive stone pyramids. The Egyptians, if you read the manuscripts, they talk about religion and how they use it to essentially create this logic above logic where people have to do stuff to achieve certain things in the afterlife, in the future, in the living a better life. There's always like some Messiah, and the Messiah isn't always a person. Sometimes the Messiah is an idea, like heaven, right? The inherent problem with this is that a lot of social media oriented platforms have acted as wake up platforms for people. People now realize that earning $15 an hour is total bullshit. You can go work in some other industry, right, and try and buy something and then rent that thing. And then a year after renting it, you've established income on it. Then you can borrow against it, buy another one until you have 10 of them, and then you don't work anymore. The assets do the work for you. You just keep growing it. The point I'm getting at is the internet broke people. And a lot of these retired people are really now into the internet. I didn't think it was ever going to happen in my lifetime, but they are really into it. They are becoming more politically active than ever before. It is my belief that the retired are actually going to have to save our politics, and that they've been awoken from all this social media stuff to see what's going on. Now, you're always going to have a certain percentage being manipulated. Smart, dumb, those with deep analysis skills, those with none. You're always going to have people being manipulated. It's like the kid going through college, having all these like really strong views, and then the moment they have to get a job and realize how much tax money is being taken out, they're like, "Yeah, I don't want to pay for that. I don't have to pay for that." Right? They go through that idea. It's a transition. It's like a right of way, right? They go from like extreme left to like middle right. Like the moment they get their job and get their first paycheck, they're like, "Oh shit!" They get over here. And I think that that's really an interesting thing, is that we're going to have to rely on the retired to kind of wake up and begin the process of saying, I not only don't want to have to live this way myself, so I'm going to vote in all these things to make it better for me to live, but I don't want my children and their children to live in this world that's like this. So the retired are going to have to betray the rich. Now, they can either betray the young too, and I think they will in the very beginning. I think they will stab the younger people in the back. But I think ultimately, a lot of the changes that they're creating, they will then pass on to younger generations. So bottom line is, I think the question, I think Christy answered it right there with hers. She definitely doesn't want to work past 70. I think the question you need to ask yourself is, when is enough enough? When do you want to stop working? Because for Christy, 70 years old is the cutoff. But the reality is, if you're going to live to 81, right, potentially you could work more years, but you wouldn't want to. But if you're a male and you're only going to live to on average 73 years, then 70 is, you're kind of there. You know what I mean? The option has run out. So the question I bring to you guys, and I hope that you can give me some answers on your thoughts, do you want to continue to work? Or do you want to just vote in laws that make the government more accountable? And I don't mean that as a political thing. I realize that weirdly is like political now. Like there's the spend whatever you want party and become accountable party. I don't mean it as a political thing. It's a company. We either make it accountable, not just for its money, but its rules, its regulations that abuse its elderly and disabled. We find a way to make, right, these super ultra mega rich pay their true fair share so that it works for Americans, which is, again, not a political thing, but that supports the left. We can do that by having the accountability of the right and to make the rich pay their fair share on the left. Because you know how it works. The rich make the middle class believe that the poor are taking all their money. The poor do take a chunk of money, but there's that other equation of the rich. They take a bunch themselves too. Now, you then have to ask yourself, is that capitalism? Because remember, if you're taking more money from the rich, it at some point converts out of being capitalism. And you have to then consider, what do you want? So I hope you think about these things going forward. I hope you think about these changes, these potential options of reducing restrictions and those things that penalize people from working as disabled and retired people. I hope you understand that the working class individuals that we traditionally think of as working class individuals, remember, people used to live only until their 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s. Now we're at the 80s mark. Now we're looking at the 90s mark. We just keep pushing the amount of years on people to have to work and pay and play the game. I think social media has changed all that, though, because you got people on social media who had nothing, who made it, and then they told their story as part of a sales technique to get more views, to get more people signing up for their clinic. And then all of a sudden people learned, holy crap, I don't have to work a corporate job. I don't have to work this existence. And so what happened is the rich people started to become the enemy. And now that the rich are becoming the enemy, what's happening is the poor and the middle class are starting to say, hey, we want what they have. Now that is socialism that can evolve into communism. So you got to be careful, right? Because making the rich pay their fair share, that's socialism 101, But at the same time, you have to consider what really works here. You're always, and I want to make one final point, and then we're going to pop over to the next video. One final point. There are people in America who are never going to work. Culturally, they don't want to work. It's just their culture. They're never going to work. You have people that are super duper lazy in this country. They're never going to want to work, right? They're never going to want to work. It's not going to happen. You have people who basically position themselves so they don't have to work. They marry a rich person, whether it's a woman or a male. They have a bunch of kids so that they can get, basically their food stamp payments and family payments and stuff like that. They position themselves well so that they don't have to work. The question then becomes, what percentage of Americans does America want to actually be forced to work? And it does seem like America is doing things as a country with politicians that forces more and more categories of individuals to have to work. I want to promote the idea to you that the standard of living is measured not in religious terms, not by how many hearts you uplift. That's religion. We're not doing that. The standard of living is measured by the quality of daily activities that you choose to opt into. Just think about that for a moment. The quality of daily activities that you choose to opt into. Your life could suck if your choices are limited because you are in World War III, in the military, and somebody says, you're going to go capture that hill over there, and that leads to your death, right? That's an extreme example of not great standard of living. The other side of the standard of living is 4 days a week, right? You have a 4-day work weekend, right? And you have a 3-day work week. For 4 days a week, you go to the beach and you do yoga and you relax and you enjoy your surroundings. But we don't have that in America. We have 5 days where you work your butt off and then 2 days where you get your overtime. Cisco did the $5 donation. Super duper appreciate that. Can working part-time while on SSDI be used against me by Social Security to say I can work and don't have to be on SSDI to get to work? So the way it works, just for SSDI benefits and disability benefits in general, is that if you're working, right, and you go outside of your ticket to work program and your extended eligibility program, they can use the earnings to show that you basically have skills that they should consider to say that you could go back to work. So if you're earning close to SGA, if you're earning like $1,400 a month, and people play that game, they'll play it right up to the line. That $1,550, they'll earn $1,400. Boom, and that's the cutoff. And they'll tell their employer, I only want this many hours, this many shifts, this many, that, no more. And some of their employers will give them that. They'll work with them. But the problem is that when you go in front of the judge, right? Because they'll do a CDR, they'll review you, and they'll say, okay, cool. Looks like you were earning $1,400 at this job. Why didn't you just earn a little bit more? Why couldn't you just earn a little bit more? Oh, I can't because I can't do any more days. This is what I've matched out. This is all I can do. Da, 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 da. Well, how do you think it looks to the judge, who has to then say, I think this person could earn another 4 hours worth of work, total amount over $1,550 per month. They're going to do it, right? The judge is going to adjudicate you to be found not disabled. So yeah, absolutely. They can use that against you. They can harm your benefits because it creates a situation where the judge can rule that you are capable of earning over SGA. And if you're able to earn over SGA, you are not considered to be severe enough for disability benefits unless you're blind, in which case they give you a higher SGA, right? A lot of you don't realize that, but there's two standards of disabled. There are the mentally and physically unsound people. That's a lesser form of disability. And then there is the higher form of disability, which are called the blind, right? And so blind SGA amount for 2024, and I always forget it, is $2,590. So if you're blind, they'll allow you to earn up to $2,590 without them cutting off your benefits. But if you're not blind, you're every other class of disabled individual, then in that instance, bottom line is they expect you to go ahead and, if you can work close to that or more than that, then you should go back to work. Now, there are caveats. Compassion allowance listing people. Those people are on death's doorstep, right? So those individuals, you're not going to be working if you have a compassion allowance listing, right? If you're waiting for a heart transplant, stuff like that, stage 4 cancer, something that's going to be terminal real quick, you're not going to be working with that, right? Unless you're like have some weird thing where you want a golden trophy given to you, after you've been cremated, right? Those kinds of people. So again, I go back to, so Fury Plants and Coins said, why is blind more? So I did a video way back in the day, maybe 7 years ago, where I talked about like which impairments I think are the most severe. And I didn't think blindness was the most severe impairment. I thought it was up there. I just didn't think it was the most severe. I think it's like top 3, but I didn't think it was the most severe. For the purposes of when they wrote the statutes, they always write them as mental, physical, and blindness. Blindness is its own separate category. It's from the very beginning of the program been consistently conceived as the most severe impairment. It's like a bell ringer. It's like this one's the absolute worst. You can't see, yada, yada. And that's because if we go back to our manufacturing days as an American country, as a country that made stuff and sold stuff and blah, 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 we didn't have in the very beginning a lot of amazing technology that helped, we'd like Braille, but we didn't have a lot of the technologies that we have nowadays to assist blind people, right? We even now have surgeries that can, reverse blindness. Same thing with loss of hearing, right? So the reality is that our special senses, we needed them more back in the day than we do now because we have technologies that can get those to us, or at least create sensory experiences so that we can feel and still do stuff, right? But blindness back in the day, man, that was a rough deal. That was a rough deal. Remember, you go back far enough in American history, remember, there was a time where people didn't have glasses. They just got shittier at seeing things, right? It's kind of a weird idea. Like as they got older, they got worse at seeing stuff, right? And that's another thing. Like when we look at older people, right? There's a period in an older person's life. Sometimes it's a single day because they're in a car accident, whatever. But there's a period in basically older people's lives where they'll go ahead and essentially have their hearing not working properly, and then you're constantly saying to them one thing and then they don't respond. Then you say it to them again, they don't respond. And then you say it to them again, they hear you, but they don't hear what you're actually saying. And then they give you some weird response. And that's older people with their hearing. There's a period in a person's life right over here where their hearing is really not good before they basically get their, hearing implant to go ahead and assist them. And as a result of this assisting them process, right, that's all technology to help with the special senses, right? Nose, eyes, ears, mouth, taste, etc. So way back in the day when they built this whole thing, they're like, okay, out of all these special senses, because remember, being able to lift stuff, right? It's kind of important, right? Being able to think well, kind of important, kind of important. I mean, that's actually the one I feel is the most severe, but being able to think well, kind of important. But out of the options of your special senses of being able to manufacture something, be able to build something, be able to interact with, more physical interaction stuff. Because remember, you go back far enough, right, to how humans used to think and be. We're talking about trains. There weren't all these safety steps and, the little chairs that will take you up the stairs, stuff like that, motorized chairs. There wasn't all that stuff. So, April Holmes, thank you for the $10 donation. That's absolutely amazing. Very, very cool. Very, very cool. So the idea is they looked at all of the human's abilities, right? And remember, in the very beginning of Social Security benefits, they didn't have much for the mental side. It was much more restricted type of review of a person, right? It was a very different, the physical side. Yeah. Okay. There were all these different types of disabling conditions, right? Your knee was amputated, below your knee was amputated. You had this special disease, you had this special thing, this special thing. The physical was the primary thing that they looked at. And of course, out of all of your physical impairments, you could be potentially quadriplegic. That would be very, very limiting your ability to work. But they said in their original thought, if you can't see, how are you going to get places? If you can't see, how are you going to read things? If you can't see, how are you going to go ahead and produce products that are in front of you? Because remember, we used to be a much more produce products in front of you society. We used to make a lot of the stuff that we buy today. And remember, too, a lot of stuff that we buy today is all plastic, direct injected material. Back in the day, a lot of it was wood-oriented carvings, right? And stone carvings as well. Metal was kind of a more down the road thing as it evolved over and over and over again. But we didn't use metal as much because, who the hell has a welding gig that works really well, 50, 60, 70, 80 years ago? The welding gigs now, you buy a welder setup at Harbor Freight, works just fine. But you go back 60, 70 years, you go back 80, 90 years, you go back 100 years, the welding technology was a little rough. The diesel generator rigs you needed, barely fit in the back of a truck, if it existed as a technology. So that's the reality, is that they said eyesight, greatest impairment you could potentially have, even though it realistically isn't. All right. Anyways, I will catch you all at the next video. I'm going to be going live. Give me about 10, 15 minutes because I'm starting to lose my voice a little bit. But bottom line is this, I will be going live to answer questions about Social Security benefits. If I said something during this video that upset you, please just deal with it. If you like this channel and you like the ideas and how we discuss things, we talk about topics, please consider liking, subscribing, and leaving a review. Go to Google, type in Disability Resolution and or Disability Resolution Law Firm, Disability Resolution Florida, and throw some stars up on the board. I will catch you at the next video. Please have a wonderful, wonderful night. If you don't want to pop over to the next video, but if you do and you have questions, you know what this means. Phone goes here, 407-279-1754. We'll get rolling. Remember, I think Monday and Thursdays is when I'm going to go live to do that. And then also, if you need to hire me to figure something out, little $250 contract below to hire me for a private hour. So if you need to go ahead and figure something out that's tricky, you can do that below. Thank you so much. You have a wonderful day, and we'll go from there. Attorney Walter Hnot, I'll be back in 15 minutes. Thank you so much. All right. Bye-bye, everybody. Bye-bye.